The shock that changed everything. Marriage was supposed to be the beginning of my happily ever after. Ethan and I had been deeply in love, and when we exchanged vows, I was certain we'd build a wonderful life together. But love wasn't enough to shield me from the brewing storm of disapproval from his family. Little did I know that the moment I walked down the aisle and into Ethan's life, I would be entering a battlefield where I would have to fight to keep my dignity and my marriage intact. Ethan's family wasn't particularly large, but they were close-knit in a way that gave me no room to breathe. His mother, Vivian, had been the undisputed queen of the family ever since his father passed away years ago. She had this aura about her, an ironclad control over her household, a strong personality, and an opinion about everything. And then there was Chloe, Ethan's teenage daughter from his first marriage. At 16, she was at a volatile stage of life and influenced heavily by her grandmother. Both of them had made it clear from day one, I wasn't welcome. Vivian had always had high expectations for her son, and in her eyes, I was a disappointment. I didn't come from an affluent family or a notable background. My parents were humble, hard-working people, but to Vivian, that wasn't enough. She believed Ethan deserved someone with connections, status, and prestige. As for Chloe, she was at the age where the idea of her father remarrying another woman, especially someone she didn't idolize, was a hard pill to swallow. It didn't help that her grandmother's dislike for me had clearly influenced her own behavior. It started subtly, just small things at first. At family dinners, Vivian would make snide remarks about my cooking, comparing it to her late husband's mother's recipes. Chloe would mutter under her breath or roll her eyes when I tried to make conversation. Ethan, ever the optimist, would laugh it off, thinking they were just joking. But I knew better. The passive-aggressive comments slowly turned into more open hostility. It wasn't long before I felt like an outsider in my own home. Ethan and I had agreed to live in the family house, a large estate that Ethan had inherited, but Vivian still acted like it was hers to run. She would rearrange the kitchen without telling me, undermine my efforts to make decisions in the house, and act like I was just some guest overstaying her welcome. Chloe, too, would follow her grandmother's lead, blatantly ignoring my attempts to connect. One evening, a particularly awkward dinner conversation turned into another confrontation. I had made an effort to prepare Vivian's favorite dish, hoping it would soften her cold demeanor. As I placed the platter in front of her, I noticed her eyes narrow. "Well," she began, her voice dripping with condescension, "it's no wonder you didn't manage to make it as a chef. The seasoning is lacking, to say the least." Chloe giggled at her grandmother's words, glancing at me with barely concealed contempt. I bit my tongue, trying to maintain composure, but the tight knot in my stomach told me I couldn't hold back much longer. The night ended with me retreating to the bedroom in tears, while Ethan tried to mediate between his mother and me. I loved Ethan with all my heart, but how much more could I endure? As time passed, I noticed their efforts to push me out became less subtle. Vivian would often have family gatherings without informing me. When I'd find out later, it was always through someone else, not because she invited me. One evening, I overheard a conversation between her and Chloe that cemented my suspicions. "You know she's just using Dad for his money, right?" Chloe said, her voice full of teenage arrogance. "It's not like she even cares about him?" Vivian nodded in agreement. "Exactly. Ethan is blinded by love, but he'll come to his senses soon enough. We just have to wait." Hearing those words felt like a punch in the gut. They truly believed I was after Ethan's money, that I had no love for him. My parents had raised me to be independent and self-reliant. Yet here I was, reduced to nothing more than a gold digger in their eyes. Things reached a boiling point when Ethan had to leave for a week-long business trip. I was left alone in the house with Vivian and Chloe. Without Ethan's presence as a buffer, the situation quickly became unbearable. Vivian treated me like I was invisible, while Chloe openly disrespected me, making snide remarks at every opportunity. One afternoon, I returned home from running errands only to find all of my personal belongings thrown out of our bedroom. My clothes, shoes, and even some of my makeup were piled in a corner of the hallway. I stood there in shock, my heart pounding in my chest. "What's going on?" I demanded, looking from Chloe to Vivian, who stood nearby with a smug look on her face. "Oh, we thought you might want to move into the guest room," Vivian said, her tone icy. "It's more appropriate for someone of your standing." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. They had physically removed me from the room I shared with my husband, as if I didn't belong there. Tears of frustration and anger welled up in my eyes, but I refused to let them see me break down. That night, as I lay alone in the guest room, I realized that things couldn't continue like this. I couldn't let them bully me out of my own marriage. I decided to confront Ethan as soon as he returned. The turning point came sooner than expected. Ethan returned from his trip earlier than planned, surprising all of us. As he walked into the house, I could hear Vivian and Chloe in the living room, laughing over their latest attempts to undermine me. They didn't realize Ethan was standing right behind them, listening to every word. "She's just a gold digger," Chloe said, her voice filled with disgust. "Dad deserves someone better." "I agree," Vivian added. "She doesn't belong here, and we'll make sure she realizes that." Ethan stepped into the room, his face a mask of controlled fury. "That's enough," he said, his voice low but filled with authority. Vivian and Chloe froze, turning to face him in shock. "Ethan, sweetheart, we were just—" Vivian started, but Ethan cut her off. "No, you've said more than enough," he said, his tone hard. "I've stood by and watched you treat my wife like an outsider, and I'm done with it. If you can't respect her, then maybe you need to leave." Vivian's face drained of color. "Leave? But this is my house." "No, it's our house, Vivian," Ethan corrected her. "And if you can't live here peacefully, then it's time you find somewhere else to stay." Chloe stared at her father wide-eyed. "Dad, you can't be serious. You're choosing her over us?" "I'm choosing my marriage," Ethan said firmly. "And it's time you both start respecting that." The room fell into a stunned silence. For the first time since I married into this family, I saw Vivian and Chloe truly shocked, unable to respond. They had never expected Ethan to stand up for me like this, and the realization hit them hard. Over the next few days, everything changed. Chloe, still a teenager and influenced by her father's stance, began to soften toward me. She eventually apologized for how she had treated me, and slowly, we began to rebuild our relationship. Vivian, however, remained distant, struggling to accept that her son had chosen to prioritize his wife over her control. But I no longer cared. I had Ethan's love and support, and that was all that mattered. In the end, the shock that had once seemed like a breaking point had turned into the foundation for a stronger, more united family. And I, once the outsider, had finally found my place. After marrying the love of her life, a woman finds herself facing relentless hostility from her controlling mother-in-law and defiant stepdaughter. Living in their shadow, she endures constant belittling and isolation until a shocking confrontation changes everything. With her husband's unwavering support, the power dynamic shifts, leaving both her mother-in-law and stepdaughter stunned. In a battle for respect and acceptance, the tables turn in the most unexpected way, forging a new path for the family.